Imagine expanding your team's abilities without adding headcount. At Element 451, AI assistants like admissions advisors and student success coaches work alongside your staff to deliver personalized experiences at scale, offer round the clock support, and uncover data driven insights. It's not just about doing more, it's about doing it smarter. Elevate your team with an AI workforce that delivers personalized, scalable, and impactful experiences across the student lifecycle. Learn more at element451.com. Hi, I'm a former higher ed CMO, and I have a confession to make. My resume is 11 pages long. And no, I'm not kidding. This is a symptom of a larger challenge so many of us face in higher ed. How do you effectively showcase a winding, complex, and deeply layered career path in a way that resonates? If you've ever stared at your own CV, wondering what to cut, how to translate your experience, or whether you're the right fit for an executive role, you're in good company. That's why I'm thrilled to be joined today by Mike Morris from the Ward Group. We're pulling back the curtain on what search firms are really looking for in executive candidates, how to position your experience, and what it takes to make the leap to your next chapter. Mike brings a recruiting mindset shaped by his early career in college athletics, with stops at Boston College, Harvard, and Dartmouth. Now with the Ward Group, he channels that same competitive, people-first energy into executive search, helping institutions look beyond the job description and candidates beyond the resume. He's here to help us decode what search firms are really looking for and how to stand out in today's job market. You're listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO, the podcast where marketing minds in higher ed come to pull back the curtain, spill a little tea, and talk honestly about what it takes to market in this industry. I'm Jaime Hunt, the founder of Solve Higher Ed, author of Heart Over Hype, and a former campus CMO who spent more than 2 decades navigating the weird, wonderful world of higher education marketing. This show is for the strategists, the storytellers, the change agents, and anyone who has ever tried to get Faculty Senate on board with a rebrand. Here we get candid about the challenges and share the ideas that are shaping the future of our field. Sound like your kind of conversation? Then let's get into it. I'm so happy to be here today with you, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks, Jamie. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. It's about 900% humidity here in Virginia Beach, but I am still doing great. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I get asked all the time from higher ed marketers and enrollment leaders, how do I get into those senior level, those executive level roles? How do I get on a search firm radar? And so when I was chatting with you and Julie, I thought this would be a great opportunity to share with my guests how to do that. And I would love to hear from your perspective. What do you wish more higher ed marketers understood about working with recruiters, especially for those senior level roles?
Yeah, well, thank you for the opportunity. I'm excited for this conversation as well. And I would say first, there are lots of different executive recruiting firms out there, including some really large ones who do a nice job. At the Ward Group, though, we take a very personalized, high-touch, relationship-driven approach. We specialize functionally, which is unique, in marketing and communications leadership roles. So almost every search that we do is for a marketing and or communications leader, and we do that across various industries. Higher education is one for us that we have been working in for 20 years, and we really do enjoy, in this case, our clients are presidents, deans, and we love partnering with search committees on a lot of higher education marketing searches. And to your question on the candidate side, for us, it is critical to have those close-knit relationships with marketing professionals across the country, and getting to know them on a professional and personal level that makes us good at what we do. And it's also what makes the job fun. So I think for people to have that as a baseline understanding might be helpful.
Yeah, I will say when I was doing a search with a different search firm, and my dad got diagnosed with terminal cancer during the search. and they ended up choosing a candidate that did not have to leave to go take care of their dad. The search firm was like, we don't understand. Like, we think you should have gotten the job. We're going to put you in the next time we have a search. And they did. And I got the job at Miami University. And it was, I don't think it would have even floated on my radar without that recruiter reaching out. And honestly, it was during COVID, and she kind of pestered me a little bit, like, this is going to be a great job. I think you'd be great at it. You should apply. You should apply. You should apply. But I really felt like they saw me, they understood me, they understood my strengths. I spent probably 2 hours over the course of the first search, talking with them, and then a bunch of times with them during the Miami search. Is that really typical to spend a lot of time with candidates?
It is. It is. And again, that's the value that we can bring to our clients. But at the same time, you're doing all the hard. I mean, kudos to you for having proven to that recruiter that you were a great candidate, and you clearly had that personal connection with them, it seems, as well. So that really is what it's all about.
Yeah. So as a recruiter, when you're talking to people and getting a sense of who they are and what their skill sets are that they bring to the table, what makes a candidate especially memorable to you? Somebody that you'll call back about a job when the right thing opens up for them.
We often approach initial conversations by asking potential candidates to talk about their career journey, when they've been happiest professionally, and then maybe get to an understanding of the more functional capabilities from a contemporary marketing and communication standpoint. Initially, the ones who can effectively communicate that career elevator pitch, if you extended elevator pitch, in addition to their contemporary marketing skill set, I think those are the ones after one conversation that stand out to say, okay, we want to go further. We're going to schedule another Zoom meeting or in-person meeting or phone call and continue to learn more. But initially, those are some of the things that if the person can do a good job with that part of the conversation, chances are we're going to continue on.
What do you wish that presidents understood about the process?
I think it's important for presidents to know and understand that there is a broad spectrum of marketing and communications skill sets out there. And oftentimes when they are envisioning a VP or C-suite level leader in their organization, in their institution, they have an idea of what that person's day-to-day job is going to be and what the most important element that they're going to bring to the senior leadership team, maybe, or for the marketing division. But a nuanced understanding of the functional skill set along the marketing and communication spectrum is pretty rare from a university or college president. And we end up occasionally spending some time, especially on the front end, trying to really help them understand where on that spectrum they're looking for this leader to be. If enrollment marketing strategy is a key priority, then we know we're indexing on that side. If the strategic communications and executive thought leadership side of things is a primary importance for this president, then we're maybe indexing further on the spectrum to the strategic comm side. So I think that often ends up being, and again, this is an early stage in a process. We are trying to determine accurately where on the spectrum of marketing and communications this leader's skill set will fall.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious about how you help your clients distinguish between someone who's ready for a VP role versus someone who maybe is growing in that space, or potentially they are ready for it, but they haven't had that title yet.
We often say that how you do what you do is more important than what you do. So, and I guess that falls in the sort of emotional intelligence and style and approach. That element of a senior leader at a college or university is really paramount. For a AVP or someone who's not sitting in the VP seat or the CMO seat at the moment, that is a crucial element of, do they have the ability to succeed in this role, and where does that EQ kind of, where does that person's EQ fit into what is required for this leadership role? Oftentimes, there experience directly supporting a president or a dean or a leader versus their maybe exposure to that executive leadership is also a really big factor in determining, okay, they may not be a VP who reports into a president, but they have some strong exposure to the executive leadership team, or they sit on this committee, or they happen to be a executive communication, they're being leaned on for executive comms. So while they're not sitting in cabinet meetings, there is this. So oftentimes that ends up being an important part of determining whether that person can step up into the VP role based on how much exposure they have had or not. And then, of course, the scope of management portfolio. Is this person already leading a large team? They may have an assistant vice president's title, but they're leading a wide and large scope and team. Okay, chances are they're probably closer to that VP title than someone who has a smaller or more narrow management portfolio.
That makes sense. I think early in my career, my very first higher ed job, I was a PR coordinator, but I did the executive comms for the president. I met with him weekly and got communications priorities from him. And then from there, moved into a news director role where I worked directly with the president. Actually, we're still in touch, and it's been 17 years, something like that. And that, I think, gave me that early exposure that prepared me maybe a little bit earlier in my career than if I hadn't had that exposure and having to build and see and experience like that executive presence and understand, they would both sort of give me their deep insights into the decisions that they're making and, do these big brain dumps and stuff. So I say all that to say, if you're listening to this and you are a PR coordinator or, something that's maybe not, titled even close to the career that you want to be at, there's definitely that exposure definitely can be super helpful in preparing you for those leaps ahead. I mean, I don't know if I would have become a CMO as early in my career as I did without having, or like the VP level, without having had that really early exposure to that.
Yeah, it sounds like you were lucky to have some of those experiences and probably earned them yourself too, Jaime. Equally important too, I think, is for the president and the leadership to think about whether they are capable of supporting someone stepping up into the role. Do they have the resources? Do they have the bandwidth to, hey, we would love a really talented up and comer, sometimes we'll hear, but okay, does that mean this leadership group or this president is willing to spend the time and energy and effort and resources in some cases to help them develop? And we don't just mean, can you afford to help pay for a career coach or a mentor or something? It's about structurally, is this institution prepared for that? Or do they need on day one to have a sitting, really seasoned VP come in and hit the ground running?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting when you see some of the hiring decisions that get made, to see kind of that shift, and that you kind of can see inside the president's head or the dean's head or whatever a little bit. I'm really curious about what common mistakes you might see on the resumes of people who are applying for these senior level, maybe AVP or VP type roles.
Well, resumes are very subjective, just to put that out there in the beginning. So people experience them and read them differently across the board. That being said, you may be surprised at just basic spelling and grammar and punctuation mistakes that we see commonly, even at the senior vice president level. And I think it's more about consistency of formatting. So some bullets end with a period and others don't. And some dates have, dashes or hyphens or I mean, there's parentheses around some of the month and date on one job, but you go a few pages down and so it's just some of the consistency of formatting around grammar and punctuation is probably number one, I would have to say. And then certainly, what have you accomplished in having the bullets on the resume have really specific examples, metrics if possible, just being really kind of showing and proving this is the kind of results and outcomes and detail of the work that I've been doing at the various roles. And another one, Jamie, that we've seen a lot is, and it's the subheadings underneath the institution and then the title can be really helpful. So essentially, a one sentence setting the table for the reader before they get into the specific bullet points that says who you report to. Maybe you've grown, you've been promoted twice, and it isn't really reflected in the way the resume reads, or your team size can be helpful just to set a little extra context as a subheading before you get into the specific bullets can be very helpful for the reader, particularly when there's some sort of non-traditional element to it.
I'm really curious about putting in like the size of the school or the type of school it is, or if it's in a system. Is that helpful in searches?
I think that would be the exact sort of detail to add in that subheading context line about exactly. This is a large R1 university. This is a college within a university I would say we don't see enrollment size maybe as or student size as much, but that wouldn't be a bad thing just from a don't make the reader guess or wonder or be confused.
Yeah. I would say for as somebody who's been on too many search committees and who has hired so many people, I would say one thing that I think people who are at the college or school level, if your school has 5,000 students and you are leading a team of 10 people, spell that out because some schools have one communicator in a college. And so that might be the lens that they're looking at it through, where they have one or two communicators within a college and they're not doing like sophisticated level work. They're kind of doing like the flyers for the faculty members or whatever. And then other schools have really sophisticated operations that are fully. I know of one of my clients. They're running a $2.5 million budget, advertising budget in house, and being able to for her to articulate like I'm leading this team, I'm managing this size budget. These are the types of positions. Maybe that wouldn't qualify her for like a University of Michigan R1 flagship type position, but it's 5,000 students is larger than many colleges are. And it could be seen as not really a big stretch to jump from a college to a university, I would think.
Even the titles in higher education, as we know, are very inconsistent. And a director may be reporting into a dean, and you're the highest, you're leading marketing and communications at this college within a university, reporting directly to the dean, leading crisis, and there's a team of 8. Whereas some people's assumption on a director level communications professional may not be that senior and may not be that significant. So I think it is. I think you're right. The more sort of detail, especially given there's a lot of different structures and titling systems out there, it can be important.
Yeah. How do you recommend marketers position their work so it really resonates with the search committee, particularly the members of the search committee that might not be marketers themselves?
It's a great question, Jamie. And I will say that for search committees who are working with an executive search firm, that is a large part of what our role is at that point in the process, is to help guide them and fill in some of those blanks and provide the context around what a marketing professional's resume and skill set and outcomes look like for someone who may not be an expert in marketing or communications. That being said, just a kind of more generally, having specific examples outlined in your resume, in your cover letter, in your initial interview, those are the things that sometimes if you're using a lot of jargon and talking at a high level about marketing, you are going to lose people who are not familiar with the field. So we would always sort of suggest be as specific and detailed in your examples that you share to try to paint a picture that people can understand. Try not to use jargon, tying in outcomes and ROI and I think all those things, again, not rocket science by any means, but those are the sort of things that can eliminate confusion or questions. And these things will help a search committee follow along with a candidate's narrative around why they are the most qualified person for the role.
Right before this call, I was talking with a friend who is on a search that's using a search firm. And she was talking about how it's just this diverse group of people across campus to try to come together and talk about this position. But she was saying she's shocked at how often she sees resumes from marketers for marketing jobs that don't sell themselves. She's like, you're a marketer. If you can't sell yourself, you should know yourself as a product better than any other product that you're selling. If you can't sell yourself, I don't believe you can sell an institution. So that's kind of, I think about I think about marketers and their resumes, and like these should be almost no brainers, right? Like just easy peasy. But I want you to settle a debate that has been going on with a couple friends of mine. Is one page for a resume still advice? My resume is 11 pages. I'll just say right off the bat. But is a one-page resume what people should still be shooting for?
I think 2 pages may be a better standard. And again, it's rare that we would have a search committee or a client say, "Hey, we are put off by the fact that this person has a 5-page resume." Chances are they will go through the materials and read it. As you think about making this a smooth and easy process for the reader and the committee, 2 pages seems to be a more consistently typical length. But yeah, I mean, I think if you can do yourself justice in 1 page, that's great. I would say maybe 2 to 3 seems to be a little bit more uh, of the length that oftentimes. Now, the other thing is from a cover letter standpoint, Jamie, I think those single page cover letters are now growing, and it's probably a page and a half is more standard, and perhaps maybe not quite 2 full pages is what we often see from a cover letter standpoint.
Wow.
And there's rarely hard requirements around, please submit a 1 page only cover letter or please submit a 1 page only resume. So there is some flexibility, and they're leaving it up to the candidate in a lot of cases. But at the same time, just having the candidate keep in the back of their mind who is reading this and what that experience is like.
Yeah. I will admit that mine is very long because I know that I'm applying for higher ed jobs and that there will be faculty on these. And so I have a lot of publications, and they expect to see, publications, they expect to see awards, that kind of thing. So I've kind of modeled mine more after a CV. I don't need it anymore though. So it's collecting dust on my computer. I'm really curious about what trends you might be seeing in senior leadership or senior marketing roles. Are institutions creating things differently than they have in the past, or changing job descriptions, or what are you seeing out in the industry right now?
It seems that the last few years, the focus on strategic communications, specifically crisis and
Mm.
issues, was really maybe certainly the majority of the roles over the last few years that encompass marketing and communications, VP, C-suite level, have a lot of those had seemed to be indexing heavy on strategic comms, crisis communications. Today, it seems that with the enrollment cliff staring us in the face, that the pendulum may be swinging back towards enrollment marketing focus for some of these vice presidents and chief marketing or communications officers. The part of that, that's not to say that strategic communications need is going anywhere. That seems to be a foundational need at this point, and as we all know, the external uncertainty and issues in crisis doesn't seem to be going away. So the need for institutions to hire leaders who can provide really strong strategic communication support for the president and the institution at a high level, as well as bring that, in a lot of cases, for a lot of institutions, bring that strong enrollment marketing background or expertise. That seems to be a pretty common occurrence right now. And throughout it all, internal communications, which is you're never going to see in a job title necessarily, but that is also one where higher education seems to be at all times needing and really craving the internal community on these campuses craving for strong internal communications, which have not always been as strong maybe as everyone wants them to be.
It's really interesting. AI powered and people focused. This is the future of higher ed. Join us in Charlotte, June 24th and 25th for the 2025 Engage Summit. Learn how AI transforms student engagement by blending scalability with authenticity. Enrollify listeners get $50 off registration with the code Enrollify50. Register now at engage.element451.com. I'm also curious if you're seeing any shifts in the direction of AI. Are you seeing hiring institutions asking about AI experience or comfort level?
I think as time goes on, we all understand this is going to be a mandatory requirement as far as the skill sets that we're listing for a marketing professional in higher education and probably anywhere. The reality, though, is it's rare for a search committee or a position description to come to us with the high level AI, is a really mandatory and important skill set that we're looking for here. It's rare, to be honest with you, Jamie, right now. That being said, we have experienced that institutions are turning around that question on themselves more so than externally looking for someone to come in. We've probably spoken to 3 different institutions in the last week or two who are saying AI strategy and governance is at the top of our senior leadership retreat agenda this June. This July. We need to get our arms wrapped around AI strategy from a university or college perspective. And the trickle down will eventually be that now we're asking our marketing folks and a lot of other folks probably to come in with that capability. But I think, and I'd be curious, I don't know if you probably have some insight there too, whether these institutions have seemingly not really quite come to terms or grappled with their own AI stance or strategy.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I do a lot of AI training for marketing and enrollment teams, but lately I've also been doing calls with cabinets and some conversations with boards even about AI and the need for that governance and that upskilling of their teams. And what I'm seeing is really that they understand just what you're saying, that this is something they need to get their arms around. But I think the challenge comes in with typically these types of technology adoptions seem to come grassroots, like they come from the people who are quote unquote doing the work using these new tools and technologies, and then it kind of comes up. But how do you put guardrails around something that you don't understand or that you're not using? And so I think we're really starting to see, I think, cabinets and boards say, hey, we need to understand this better and actually do this strategically and with intentionality, or we're going to be in a mess. But where I do see progress happening faster, I think, is honestly on the teaching and learning side, in part because, I mean, I'm a faculty member, adjunct faculty member at WVU, and I've seen since for the fall semester to the spring semester, much more student use of AI. And it's becoming like, if we don't address how we're going to teach with this, how we're going to grade with it, how we're going to do all of this with this, it's just going to keep snowballing and we're going to not catch up. So yeah, I feel like having AI literacy would be a differentiator for a candidate, but would you agree with that?
Yes, I mean, it's certainly for someone to come in. And in fact, we have had candidates ask that, and we often say the questions you ask in an interview are sometimes as important or more important than the ones you answer. So in a few cases, we've had candidates pose the question to the hiring manager or the team, if they get an opportunity to meet the team, how are you all currently optimizing the use of AI in our marketing approach? And I can think of at least one case where the person's, hey, this is this is really a red flag for me as a candidate evaluating this my next potential employer who has there's a lot of a lot of green grass, a lot of uncertainty around how and who and the AI approach was really, really nebulous, and that cause some doubt and red flags. So it is a crucial, I mean, for those, we understand it's crucially important for at a high level for institutions to wrap their arms around it. And then at the grassroots level, to your point, we know that is where it's really blossoming and where there's probably more familiarity and adeptness. So it will be interesting here.
Yeah. It's going to be a fascinating couple of years, I think. Are you seeing candidates using AI to write their cover letters? Because that's something I feel like I'm in AI so much that I can recognize AI written stuff immediately.
Unfortunately, yes. And unfortunately, yes. Now, we all understand that there's some great tools out there, free resume, AI cover. I mean, sure, you can probably save a lot of time, be efficient, but the key is, and generally for cover letter writing, is to tie the why this specific institution, why this specific role, and what is the connection for me as the candidate. And AI is just not going to know that, of course. So you could create a structure maybe, or use it throughout your process as a candidate in your job search. There's a lot of different uses for AI, but for those specific examples of speaking, creating the narrative of why this role is attractive for me, and tying in some personal mission centric tie-ins or whatever it may be. Those are the key things, regardless of how you build and construct that cover letter. If that sort of key piece is not in place and is not customized to the school and to your own background, you're missing big time on the cover letter.
I'm always surprised when cover letters are like 4 sentences, like I'm applying for this position and this is why you should hire me or whatever. And I mean, personally, I feel like if you're applying for a marketing role, you should write your cover letter. Like maybe it helps you with structure, it helps you with grammar or something. But if you're applying for a role like a VP of comms or chief comms officer, you ought to be able to write your cover letter. I haven't had to do any of this since AI kind of took the stage, but I'm kind of thinking about this 11-page resume. And if I did need to reduce it down, potentially saying like, hey, can you help me condense some of these bullet points in my job descriptions? And is there still a standard of like, I have basically my entire career on my resume. Is there a cutoff that people should be doing where they're not listing back to their first out of college job?
Hard to say with any uniformity. We have definitely, to your point, we have had hiring managers say, wait a second, they chopped off the first 7 years of their career with some real sort of skepticism around that. And other times folks may not flip to the third or fourth page and may not even get there. I'm wondering what the person's been up to for the last 10 years, and then it's almost irrelevant. So you see it both ways. I wouldn't give a uniform answer to that. I think there's no reason to do that unless you're worried about length. I think, and even if it doesn't, sometimes the concern is, hey, this is just a sort of an outlier role that I'd love to gloss over. I think it's sometimes more, to be able to create a narrative around how that, and maybe it is to say this is a little bit of an outlier, or maybe it is tying it in somehow to your overall career trajectory. I think those sort of narratives can be appealing for hiring managers, search committees to learn about. And I wouldn't do that as a matter of course.
No, I kept mine on because my first job out was a journalist, and I wanted folks to be able to see, like, I started out as a reporter, so that's some media savvy, but certainly, in the, I'm going to mumble here, number of years since I was a reporter, a shockingly and appallingly number of years ago, that's probably not relevant to a VP role at this point. Like, if I've been a VP for a decade, like I have all these other accomplishments, I doubt there would be a president going, but she wasn't a reporter in 1997. Like, that's probably not going to happen.
Agreed.
So if you have one piece of advice for someone hoping to land a VP or a CMO role at some point in the next 1 or 2 years, what would it be?
Getting an understanding of the enterprise level in higher education. What is the business of higher education from a broad perspective. Typically, if you are not at the vice president or chief marketing officer level, you're not sitting in on the cabinet meetings, you don't have necessarily the widest institutional view. So the advice would be make those relationships with the deans on the academic side and with the CFO, because we all know that's a really, really crucial partner for any senior leader. Certainly with the president when possible. And if you report into or you have access to the VP of marketing or chief marketing officer role that you are eventually looking to step into yourself, it would be great for that person to be a direct sort of mentor and help you grow. But we all know that it's not always the case that you can do that. But being intentional about having the relationships and insight into the broad enterprise level, business of what makes a successful college or university run. I mean, that's for someone in the central organization. Certainly for those enrollment marketing leaders or on the advancement alumni relations side of things, for those folks to make an intentional effort to get across and understand and meet with the enrollment leaders if you're on the advancement side, and vice versa. Certainly the academic leaders, deans, provost. And so I think that is perhaps the best way to position yourself if you're not already sitting in that seat. Getting that sort of perspective and knowledge and expertise is going to be incredibly beneficial.
I want to plus one that. I would also add, I think going to board meetings, if you are able to, that's a really great way to get an understanding of the high level conversations happening around the institution. And also, if you go to those and you think, I want to die, this is awful, you don't want to be a VP or a C-suite
Great
leader.
point. Yes.
You're going to be in a lot of those. But that's, I think, where I first got introduced to a lot of the issues around higher ed was as a PR coordinator covering those types of meetings, going to them and reporting out on them, exposed me to so many things I didn't know what net tuition revenue was when I started out as a recovering journalist, getting exposed to what the budget models look like and how the university is funded. And when you can speak intelligently about that, I think that would be enormously helpful for your career, not just at the institution that you're at, but wherever you're aspiring to go. And I will say that the piece of advice that you gave about reaching out to the CMO if you're not like within that central group or whatever. I had someone who is a mentee of mine now who was an executive assistant who wanted to be in PR, who reached out to me in 2015. And she, by 2020, was in a cabinet level role because she impressed me. I hired her. I cheerleaded her. I championed her. I, encouraged her, supported her, nominated her for every job that I could. And that, to be at a cabinet level, I guess maybe it was 6 or 7 years to go from an executive assistant to a cabinet level position in that time. She was smart. She had the skills. She's brilliant. You should probably put her in a search at some point.
Sounds like a spread.
And now she's crushing it. I mean, she keeps getting promoted where she is. But it all started with making kind of like, hey, I just want to talk to you about your career and get to know you and tell you a little bit about myself. And she just impressed me so much. So don't overlook that as a potential. And even reaching out to other CMOs, like at other institutions, getting advice and picking their brains. And then when a position comes up, they might nominate you for that as well.
Yes. And for us, I mean, to that point, Jamie, the referrals are crucial. I mean, and a lot of the conversations that we have during a search are not necessarily targeting potential candidates, but people who can help us find those potential candidates based on our existing relationship with them. And so the more of those relationships you can build across, especially those sort of leadership levels across the industry of higher education at your own institution and others, it's only going to be helpful.
I made it a practice when I first started getting the emails from recruiters that even if they weren't roles I was interested in, I responded to every single one and either said, if I think of somebody, I'll send them your way, or It's even like I'd love to hear more about the position. I'm curious, and then maybe it's not something I'm interested in, but I've started that conversation or make a referral for somebody. But just letting those go into your archive bin or your trash can, it's a missed opportunity, I feel like.
Absolutely. And even from a intellectual curiosity, and maybe you learn about a role that you're not going to be applying for, but that helps give you a little bit more perspective or industry knowledge. And in best case, maybe you end up being connected with someone who can grow your own network. So that's sort of the approach that we take with those too, that, it's, and that again, it makes our role fun. And I think that's part of what makes working in higher education fun. Is it is a really people and relationship driven industry, and leaning into that is great.
So this has been such a great conversation. Where can people find you if they're interested in learning about, what positions might be open or recommending someone for a position?
On LinkedIn, I am under Michael Morris, and the Ward Group website would be another good place.
Awesome. And as always, listeners, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jaime Hunt, Jaime. And you can also find me on my website, solvehighered.com. And don't forget about my book, heartoverhypebook.com. It's available wherever fine books are sold online. I think there's a few physical bookstores, but good luck. And in the meantime, let's go bust some silos. Thanks for listening to Confessions of a Higher Ed CMO. This show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where Higher Ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and contact drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.